the good friends, the ones we hold dear, the ones who will tell us what we need to hear, the ones who love us, right or wrong, and to all those good friends that give you this song.
Well, hello, good friends, and welcome back to The Last Walk, Remember When, with your host, Ron Baumbach. And we're going back in time again today to the fun times, the DJs of our lives. So, get off your easy chair, walk over to your fridge, open up, reach way in the back at that tall glass, and find that bottle of Hires root beer. Pour it into your tall glass, watch it sizzle and fizzle and tickle your nose, and reach up into the cupboard for a package of M&Ms. They melt in your mouth, not in your hand. Now, turn on your lava lamp, sit back in your easy chair, close your eyes, it's storytelling time. The Last Walk is back.
Life is too short, we get only one turn. With luck we find beauty, but we sometimes get burned. But if you've had a true friend, or perhaps love, you've experienced the peace of heaven above.
Friends, remember on a summer day or a winter day or coming home from school, turning on your transistor radio? You may have had those long earphones or maybe a Sony Walkman if you were that rich. And you put it on and you turned on the radio and you heard this.
Music and Big Dan Ingram next on the home of the All-Americans, WABC, New York.
More music on
Lovely. Beautiful greetings, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Whatever you want.
WABC.
Ah, that ain't wrong thing. Ricky, ticky, boom,
Now, when I was a kid, we were thrilled. See, my brother Dick got a job working at WABC Radio in the early 60s. It was, as Dick Vitale would say, awesome, baby! Tremendous. He would bring home these 8x10 glossies, signed autographs of my heroes. Herb Oscar Anderson, Scott Muni, Cousin Brucey, Charlie Greer, you name it, they were there. Now, the radio was a very important part of our life back then, especially mine. I was thrilled when I was given my own transistor radio, a little red gadget that could go anywhere under my pillow, anywhere on my sleeve. I remember listening to a baseball game, a World Series, hiding the speaker up my sleeve and having my hand next to my head, listening to the game going on. All the while, I thought the teacher didn't know what was going on. I think she did. Anyway, it was amazing. I would have Harry Carey on the radio at nighttime doing Cardinal games. I have my own Bob Murphy, Ralph Kiner, and Lizzie Nelson doing my Met games. If I couldn't sleep late at night, listen to Long John Neville or perhaps Barry Gray. In the morning, my mom always listened to a guy named Bill Cullen on 66 WNBC. He was replaced by a guy from Cleveland, I believe, named Imus, with the show Imus in the Morning, which became its legend on the network for many, many years. So I think back to the days of the disc jockey. The people who spin those labels and turn those tables will bring the music of our lives. I did it back in college for about 4 years. It was a fun time. WMCR Radio, the voice of Maris and the pride of Poughkeepsie. Thanks to the wonders of Wikipedia and a website called musicradiowabc.com, there's a wonderful information you can find about the history of the DJ and the music and different radio stations from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Way back when, in 1892, a guy named Ernie Berliner began commercial production of his own records called gramophone records, the first disc records to be offered to the public. And the earliest broadcasts of recorded music were made by radio engineers and experimenters. And on Christmas Eve in 1906, an American named Reginald Finseddon broadcast both live and recorded music from Brant Rock, Massachusetts. And in 1907, the American inventor Lee DeForest broadcast a recording of the William Tell Overture, which supposedly was the first broadcast to be heard. Now, in my mind, that was always a Lone Ranger theme. I wasn't into classical music, I guess. Anyway, by 1910, radio broadcasters started to broadcast live orchestras, as well as pre-recorded sounds. And in 1911, a guy named Elmer Myers started broadcasting a daily program in New York City, consisting mostly of recorded music. And in 1914, his wife Sybil True broadcast records borrowed from a local music store. The first British DJ was a guy named Christopher Stone, who in 1927 convinced the BBC to let him broadcast a show on the radio of American and American-influenced jazz records. And the very first person to use the term DJ, disc jockey, was a very famous man named Walter Winchell. In 1935, he referred to these guys who turned those labels and played the songs as disc jockeys. And the reason for that terminology was a man named Martin Bloch, who was an announcer, who basically became a star. He was doing the news, waiting for the final news about the kidnapping of the Lindbergh baby. In between waiting for news updates, he started to play music, and Winchell called him a disc jockey. Who's your favorite disc jockey from the past? Who's the one you always listened to, you made sure was prime time radio when you were a teenager, a teen bop, listening to those tunes back in your transistor?
Hello again, here's my best to you. Are your skies all gray? I hope they're blue.
None other than Herb Oscar Anderson, the Morning Man, from 1960 to 1968 on WABC 77. When we flipped the channel from Bill Cohen and didn't listen to Imus, we listened to HOA because my brother Dick worked with them at the station in the morning. Or maybe you're like this, from the guy who replaced Herb Oscar Anderson, coming over from WMCA.
On the Good Guys Show with Joe O'Brien over WMCA, New York.
Or perhaps you listen to this guy.
Let's check the time. 9 minutes after 6, Friday morning. Harry Harrison, WABC, December.
This is Harry Harrison. Originally came from Chicago. Harry first worked at educational station WBEZ, and then was a temporary disc jockey at WCFL. His next stop, a program director at WPEO in Peoria, Illinois. He moved to WABC in New York after first serving with WMCA, the rival station, and was a good guy from 1959. Then he went on to work at WABC. And in the afternoon, we had a guy named Dan Ingram, who was born in September of 1934, grew up in Flushing, New York, and Malvern, Long Island, New York. Started his career as a teenager at WNRC in New Rochelle, New York, moved to WALK in Patchogue, Long Island. Then he went to Bridgeport under the different name of Ray Taylor. Then he went to WNHC in New Haven, Connecticut, then on to Dallas, to KBOX, and WWIL in St. Louis, and then on to WABC.
More music on
Lovely. Beautiful greeting, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Whatever you want.
WABC.
Ah, that ain't wrong thing.
Go!
A ricky ticky boom a dumpa, rumpity dang. It's Saturday again and I'm working.
We had a lot to choose from back then. We had WABC, WMCA, WINS, and WMGM. We had 4 major stations broadcasting music for the kids.
No, it's Monday, but come on, be happy. You're with the good guys on WMCA Radio.
This is WMCA.
The original group being Joe O'Brien, Harry Harrison, Jack Spector, Don Davis, and Jim Harriott. And in the fall of '61, a fellow named Dandy Dan Daniel joined them as well. Or perhaps you like to listen to and we all know who that was. That's Murray Decay and his Swingin' Soiree on 1010 Winds, New York. All music, all the time, until they went to become all news all the time when they switched their format in the late 60s. Murray was a guy called the Fifth Beatle, who was instrumental in making them go travel around America. You always saw Murray with Paul, Ringo, John, and George.
Oh, I've been so lucky and I've been so blessed. In spite of my failings, I've found success. For I've known love and I've known good times, and I have known friendship and written some rhymes.
With all these stations though, my personal favorite was the 50,000 watt WABC 77, where my brother Dick worked. Ron Lundy, Charlie Greer, Herb Oscar Anderson, Scott Muni, Cousin Brucey, and Dan Ingram.
This is 77 WABC.
Ron Lundy started as a record librarian in his hometown station in Memphis, Tennessee, WHMM. One night, the disc jockey didn't come to work, so they put Ron on the radio. The rest is history. He met a friend named Dan Ingram at WBIL Radio in Baton Rouge, and Dan introduced him to the people at 77 WABC.
Ron Lundy. Hello, love. Good morning, everybody. Thursday morning, WABC New York. Thank you for making WABC the most listened to station in the nation.
And from Akron, Ohio, WAKR Radio, a guy named Charlie Greer moved over to ABC on December of 1960. He moved back and forth between overnights and midday shift. But he was one of the original Swingin' Seven from 77 WABC.
It's your thing, 17 minutes now past 1 o'clock, WABC chime time. And this is the Charlie Greer Show all night long from the station where the hits come faster, 77 Radio.
But one of my personal favorites who I listened to back then and find myself still listening to now. I think he's still on Sirius Radio. After serving on ABC, he worked on WCBS 101.1 and now Sirius Radio. The one, the only. Cousin Brucey, a legend. Love his sounds and love the way he can play those tunes. Keep it going, Cousin Brucey. You're the best. Speaking of the Cuz, remember hearing this commercial all the time. Maybe you did as well.
Palisades has the ride, Palisades has the fun. Come on over. Shows and dancing are free, so's the parking, so gee. Come on over.
You couldn't ask for more. Then along came FM about 1970s, and it started to dwindle away. Yes, we were blessed. Many, many great people led us in a music journey throughout our youth. Dick Clark, George Michael, who went on to become George Michael Sports Machine. Ryan Seacrest doing it now. Wolfman Jack, Scott Shannon, Rawson Wilson, Johnny Donovan, Alan Freed, and a guy named Casey Kasem with his top hits. We definitely, friends, have been blessed with incredible people on the radio. Thanks for the memory, guys, and thanks for joining me on this journey.
Here's to good friends, the ones we hold dear, the ones who will tell us what we need to hear, the ones who love us, right or wrong, and to all those good friends who give you this song.
You've been listening to The Last Walk, Remember When, with your host, Ron Baumbach, and a special thanks to many, many people. Paul Cassone for the wonderful song He Is the Good Friends heard throughout our show. My good friend Mike from his studios in the state of Tennessee for making our voice in our show